I like their concept of bending the dark. You know, bending light is one thing, but bending the dark, quite the opposite. Right. So, what are we going to? We're going to. Oh, I know what we're going to. The subject, which is a burning subject at the moment, because it was yesterday or the day before that was the big day for declaring. And I think I'm right. If you've got over 250 employees or staff, you had to declare by yesterday the gender pay gap, or the difference between what you're paying all the men and all the women in your companies. And I gather that the average gender pay gap across the country is 18.4%. But the Sunday, where did I get this? HR Grapevine reported a Sunday Times survey of the Sunday Times 100 best companies to work for, and they reported some of their stats. One of the companies we've not heard of before, Chess, don't know what they do, 23%. But I'm just interested to look down. It seems to range from 3% to about 36, from what I can make out. There's one there, 30%, Toyota, which I'm going to say at the outset didn't surprise me. But Paul, you'd obviously been watching this subject closely, and you sent something in about football clubs and the gender pay gap.
In fact, I saw this in the Evening Standard on my way back from London, and the headline was "Football Clubs Top the Table of Gender Pay Gap Miscreants." Now, one wonders when you see something like this, what's going through people's minds. And it looks to me, when you look at it at first, as if the whole idea of the gender pay gap is a way of providing headlines for people to use this as a crude and misleading tool.
Yeah.
Of the top 20 companies that had reported by, I think it was last Tuesday, 18 are football clubs. And surprise, surprise, you know, thus far I've seen one young lady who's an assistant referee, but I haven't seen any females playing for Manchester City, or they would liven things up at Arsenal for sure. They're not worth watching. Oh, sorry. But the real issue here is that anyone knows in a football club the biggest cost is going to be the players. I mean, particularly if you're Manchester United, you're paying £600,000 a week to some Chilean chap. That's a lot of programme sellers, more than even Manchester United need. So this is where I find I have some difficulty with the idea of the gender pay gap as such, because we've got legislation about discrimination.
Yes, if the articles imply discrimination, that's a completely different subject, I think, to this gender pay gap discussion that we should be having. Yeah.
But having said that, I'm now going to go back on myself, because on further thought, this is a good way of at least getting the topic talked about. Because what most sensible people will say is that, you know, it's if you work in a business where the majority of people are going to be men, or the majority are going to be women, you're going to see swings and changes. What really matters is that two people doing the same job get paid the same money. So in that respect, much as I got a bit on my high horse for a little while, I calmed down and I thought, well, yes, it is being talked about, but let's not overdo it.
It's for me that there is a bigger conversation there, which means if we get stuck on the wrong idea, if we get the wrong end of the stick here and believe this is all about discriminating females against males, then I think you're missing the bigger conversation, which will be of more value and help to bring about equality than talking about discrimination. But I noticed Arsenal's 79.6%. Did you mention the figure overall? Football clubs 83%.
Yes.
Well, you know, it's a big number. It's where people go.
But the interesting thing is, if you dig down into the article, it actually says that if you take out the professional playing staff, the gender pay gap at the football clubs is below the national average. So exactly. Having put the boot in,
the football boot.
Did you hear that?
Yes.
Did you hear that?
Laura Anita, whom I guess is a lady, she's done her job as far as her employers are concerned. She's getting things talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the issue is with I think we're all agreed that pay equality, equal pay for an equal job, is a valid concern. It's enshrined in law, and there's lots of cases of people bringing their employers to court and all that good stuff. And long may that continue, because inequality is a bad thing in that scenario. The gender pay gap, though, the blame always seems to be pointed at the employer, at the business. It names the businesses which have a poor gender pay gap or a high gender pay gap where it's an issue. But I think it's much more, as a generality, it's much more about the industry. So if you look at the average local preschool, you will find that the teaching assistants and the lower rungs of and primary schools as well, perhaps even secondary, but the lower rungs are more often filled by women. They're often working mums, so it suits them to be working school time. And you can argue there's no reason a man shouldn't do exactly that, but men seem not to want to,
which is the bigger question.
Yeah, is it the fault of the employer? When they advertise a vacancy, they don't say they're advertising for a woman, they say they're advertising for a teaching assistant. If men don't apply, why is that the fault of the business? And when you look at it the other way around, and why do women not apply for some of the other jobs? There is a lot of positive work being done in a number of businesses to try and make jobs more female friendly, to have creches, to have flexible working so that mums can look after kids. And it does beg the question, why don't dads look after kids? But hey, so I'm really not sure that the business is going to be blamed for this, and that's where the fingers are really pointing.
Well, talking of pointing fingers, one of the other things I pull out of this article, which I think is quite interesting, is that it says that 56 employers said they have no pay gap at all, a situation that is highly improbable, because it would mean employing an identical number of men and women on the same salary across pay grades. Could it also be that a company is just all men or all women?
Yes, indeed. Like some of them, I suppose the fire service is no longer a good example, but it suddenly came to maybe the fire service at one time would have been pretty much exclusively male. Not anymore,
and
though.
You see, there are organisations like the fire service, police, and a number of others where traditionally it was a male environment, and women have now started to quite rightly take their place in those services. But they haven't had enough time doing that to progress through the ranks yet. So the upper echelons are still men. And
I was going to say it is generational, because
absolutely
we've only had in the last 3 or 4 years equal the ability for either parent to take parental leave, and it's still coming in up to a year for male or female or a combination.
Yes.
So traditionally, that's been possibly between 2 and 10 years out for many females in certain industries. In that time, the males could have moved on 4 times.
Right.
You were encouraged in the 80s and 90s to move jobs every 2 years to progress your career.
Yeah.
So within a gamut of a pay every pay incrementation, they would be more towards the top because they've accumulated more.
They've
been bought by the company on a higher.
Yeah, and there's a number of big reasons there behind all that, aren't there? That are obviously worth exploring. If I heard a guy from the States being interviewed on another radio station, because I was too far away to receive our own broadcast in the car, so I couldn't get it on the internet. So I was listening to somebody else. And they got this guy over from the States who was furious with Theresa May for using what he said were appalling statistical analysis and using statistics in the wrong way. But he simply said, look, there's a very simple, lots of simple explanations for why these things have occurred. And one of them would be, for example, we know that a lot more women in part-time work than men. And if you work part-time, you're going to earn less. But also, he said, if somebody works 40-odd hours, they are going to earn more, double what somebody who only works 35-odd hours are. So he said there's a whole thing about part-time work and about working hours that women are prepared to indulge in. And he said, if choices that you've just pointed out, Mark and Drew, are being freely made, then you've got to look at whether you want to encourage choices to be made differently.
Well, I think all this boils down to the fact that they've legislated for one thing. The other thing is pressure. And as Drew has quite rightly put, this is a snapshot today.
Yeah.
Long after I've more than retired, and they come back and look at this, it will be different.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will.
It's changing now. You can see it.
If we'd have looked at this sort of 35 years ago, when my father was really outraged that my mother should want to go back to work, and I could not understand him. I just couldn't get my head around what he objected to, but there we are. So, Paul, picking up on the folk.